Welcome to Unofficial ACI Guide. I'm Jody. Today we're going to be looking at the host-based routes feature inside of ACI that allows us to optimize ingress routing for multipod, multi-site, and other topologies. Let's take a look.
So from routing, when we advertise 192.168.100 to the rest of the network, from their point of view, they'll see /24. So let's
So
say
they're going to see equal cost paths to that same /24 from the stuff in the cloud there.
Exactly. So that means we could potentially tromboning the network because let's say I'm trying to get to borrow, let's say, the device here, but since they're equal cost from routing, the hash could end up this way, and it'll go across the multipod, So I mean, there is nothing wrong with that, but it's just a suboptimal path. So what we can do to make it more efficient, we can turn on the host-based routing. So which means we're going to advertise the /32 for that subnet. So let me show you how we do that. So before we do that, let me show you the routing.
And to be clear on this, guys, what we're talking, go back to that drawing real quick. What we're talking about is ACI the spines have full knowledge of every endpoint in the fabric. So if we have, obviously we're going to be advertising the /24s out, both L3 outs at each pod, going down into the corporate network there. With the host-based routing, what the logic is if the endpoint lives in pod 1, the spines know this, it's going to leak that /32 route out pod 1 because the endpoint lives in pod 1. The /32 route will not be leaked from pod 2, only the /24. So wherever the endpoint is, if the endpoint is in pod 1, that's where the /32 route for that endpoint will be leaked, and vice versa, pod 2. So Javed, why don't you take us to Opossum and let's take a look and see what that route looks like today, and then we'll turn that knob on and see what it looks like after we click that on the BD.
Sure. If I go here, show IP route 192.168.100.0. As you see, we have two equal cost paths, each 1.1 and 1.2, which is Bradford and Otter. So if I go back to diagram, so from his point of view, he could send it this way or to the Otter, right?
Okay.
So now what we're going to do is let's turn on the host-based routing, and very simple, just one click. So for production, you just want to make sure any VLANs that you're extending, you want to turn on the host-based routing because that generates a lot of /32. So, and depending on your routers, so it could, you want to make sure you don't overwhelm the router sitting outside the fabric. So if I go to back networking, it's domain 100, and see right here it says advertise host routes. Select that and submit. I go back. And now if I do show IP route, so for one of the boxes, 192.168.100, I'm using 30 through 39.
They were in pod 1, right?
30, yep. And then 40 through 49.
And that's in pod 2.
Yeah.
Okay. So in theory, this should be going to Bradford, right?
Yep. Show CDP right here, 811 Bradford.
Yep.
If I do 40, 12, Otter.
Very nice.
And if I do show IP routes for the whole thing, you see a bunch of routes.
Right.
So that gives you more routes in your table, but it gives you optimal path. So that's But as I said, just you got to use this feature wisely because that's that can generate a lot of routes if you have a lot of subnet that is extended.
Yeah, and this particular feature, the host-based route feature on the BD, this takes place of part of the functionality that you may have heard of, something called Golf, which was a feature in ACI which allowed host-based routing, and it also allowed multi-VRF configurations to be synchronized on external devices. But we found that for about 80 to 90% of the use cases, customers were using Golf for host-based routing functionality and not needing the multi-VRF synchronization. And the Golf configuration was frankly very complex. So you see how complex this is? It's not. You click a button on the BD and boom, you've got host routes. So for the 80 to 90% of the customers that were using Golf that needed that functionality, this is where you do host-based routing. It's much simpler. And as Jabin said, just because it's simple doesn't mean you need to enable it everywhere. You need to be thoughtful in where you're deploying it, where you need to make sure you're avoiding asymmetric routing and things like that. You can use this, but probably wouldn't want to enable this everywhere just because you'll be flooding your production network with /32 routes. Just be aware of that.
Thanks for watching the video today. If you'd like more ACI how-tos, design guides, and best practices, check us out on the web at unofficialaciguide.com or on YouTube.